Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the LetShuoer S15. It's a third generation planar driver, 14.8 millimeters, pressure release valve. So lots of cool things going on the internals of this guy. The outside is a baby blue plastic, metal faceplate, 2-pin, very nice modular cable, nice box, nice packaging. I think all that stuff is pretty well documented at this point, so we won't spend too much time. And we will jump into it and go through this one kind of quickly. I think there has been, I would call it hesitation to review it, hesitation to purchase it, hesitation to talk about it, and it all kind of gets back to the price. It's just a little bit more than probably what people are willing to pay at this point in time. I think this one definitely will have a second life when they drop the price a bit, but for now, we'll kind of spin through this one kind of quickly. So I do think some of the marketing things around S15 sounded a little more complicated, but it's not really as complicated as it appears. It's next generation driver, relaxed tuning. It's the smoothest, most refined off-the-shelf planar that you can get. I think it pretty much connects the line from where the planar started out at Timeless, which was this, detailed beast, but a little bit raw, not as refined. And then you get S12, which tried to be a little bit more refined, but still had a ton of detail. And S12 Pro kind of refined that. And then you kind of end up at S15, which is kind of a smoother, more refined version, in this line of planars sounding like planars. And I think it does fit that role pretty well. I think mostly it got rid of the offensive brightness of some of the previous models while sounding more natural. And I think that's been a lot of the complaints going back all the way through Timeless and S12. They had a little planar timbre to it, a little bright, a little hard to deal with. And then you end up at S15, and it's sort of, after all of that feedback, you end up with something that's very general appealing and quite smooth and more natural than any of those previous sets. But as I was talking about, the elephant in the room in this one is obviously the price. $330. I think the magic of planars with most of these sets were the ability to really punch into mid-fi performance, but at a much lower cost. So we go back and look at Timeless. That was, I think, $220 when it was released. And people thought that was a little bit expensive, but the detail that you were able to get out of Timeless definitely punched right into mid-fi. And then S12, kind of very similar, it brought down the price even more. It was more affordable, high level of performance, but at a very affordable price. And then you look at S15, and now we're at about $330. So we are effectively paying mid-fi prices for mid-fi performance. And that's, I think, just a little bit less appealing and kind of at the root of a lot of this hesitation to talk about this set. The pressure relief valve, I don't know. Not sure. I don't have that much pressure problems typically with IEM, so it didn't really affect me. I understand that other people do, and they'll see some bonus in that. But I would say watch out for bad fit on the cable. This one tends to, the ear hook's just a little bit, a little bit tight. They kind of pull the shells a little bit. Shells are lightweight and plastic. So just make sure that they're not tugging on your shells. And if you want to hear the pressure relief valve, I think you do have to have a little deeper insert and make sure it's really stuck into your ear to have that actually equalize the pressure. Source pairing. So as I was saying, I think this one, S15, is a little bit less complicated, but more complicated on the source pairing. And that's really due to the bass and the treble levels. It takes very little from a source to really push it off balance, either brighter and flatter or warmer and less open. Very tight bass levels and treble levels, and the way those two work in balance and how that's going to work against your source pairing. I thought that was actually more difficult than it should have been. And it really pushed it in one of two ways. So do pay particular attention to that and try all your sources. Sound, I think kind of a warm neutral or more of a bass boosted neutral. And we'll kind of take a look at what's going on here. So S15 in the red, MP145 in the green. Kind of up till S15, probably the smoothest version of planar that was out there and still maintain a high level of performance. And you can kind of see how the two are balanced. So MP145 does have a little bit more bass here, but actually kept the treble levels kind of at a a nice level that you could actually hear it against this amount of bass and carried it straight over. S15 didn't really drop the bass a whole lot. It kind of dipped out the sub bass a little bit, but this is still a lot of bass, but then tended to dip the treble even more. So this becomes easier to hear, or there's more of it because there's not a lot of this riding on top of it. So the balance is actually a little bit different on these two. And, I think this will appeal to some people. I think this dip down treble is very appealing to some people. Some people who are looking for the treble / airiness, not going to find it as much in S15. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting way. They kind of didn't dip the bass too much, but poke this up just a little bit to give you a little more energy here, but then dip down the presence. And those two aren't exactly equal, and it depends on your tracks and how you prefer it. I wouldn't say that was an equal trade-off to bump it a little early and then to dip this. For me, I think dipping out the treble tends to be more noticeable and make this more noticeable. And as I said, when your source tends to push this up a little bit or dip this out a little bit, it becomes very noticeable. And I think MP145 was a little more tolerant in those cases, where you could just say don't add any more bass and everything is kind of fine. There was still plenty of treble to stand up and pair against the bass. But with this kind of dip to the treble, that becomes very difficult to really find the balance in the bass and to make sure it's not overriding or overstepping into the mids. So as I was talking about, I think my least favorite part was the bass, and a lot of it is for that same reason. Sometimes it just sounds like too much. Sometimes it can actually sound U-shaped because of that early rise. It tends to catch your ear a little bit more, and there's not really a ton of bleed into the mids on some tracks. It was very hard. I couldn't really find tracks that really made me all that happy about the bass. The impact isn't a whole lot. It's kind of softened and smoothed over. And I just really wasn't a fan of the tips of the source emphasizing the bass. And a lot of it goes back to that the balance of it gets kind of thrown off. It just takes very little for the bass to sound less detailed than the mids on bassier tracks. And then on tracks that have less bass, it actually sounds quite amazing. And you get more of a U-shaped sound to it. But yeah, generally I just wasn't a huge fan of the bass. So not exactly the same treble demographic as S12 Pro. If you were into kind of a higher level of forward treble and a high level of details that were very easy to hear, I think S12 did that very well. That one worked very well at low volume. I think S15 with a dip on the treble like we looked at, there's just a lower level of treble. It is very smooth and it's very solid, and I think that's the hallmark of this driver and the signature, but in this set, but you do need a little bit more volume to make sure it can be heard. And why do you need more volume? Because the tuning is really conservatively extended and could use more bite and air, which is why you need to pay attention to the source, right? If your source is dipping out the upper treble, it's going to sound a little less airy. If there's a little bit more bass added by your source, it's going to sound a little bit less airy. There's just not a whole lot of extra into the treble that you really want to lose any. So this whole bit, and again, MP145 wasn't a real treble heavy set to begin with, and S15 is even below that. So yeah, this is not a low volume style set. You definitely need to turn it up so you can hear this, and if you turn it down a little bit, you're going to miss some of that. This helps a little bit, but again, like I said, it's not quite an equal trade-off the way MP45 carried this over at that level, and S15 dipped it out. Yeah, your lower volume people are going to have to notch it up a little bit anyway. So reviewer math. I think I talk about the recipe for success quite often. Bass plus treble equals your mids. So what really happened here? A little bit extra bass and a little less upper treble, right? That gives you a very thin margin of sounding spectacularly planar. So a little extra bass kind of covers over those details and the ability to resolve in the mids that you're sort of expecting from a planar. Having an upper treble and a treble that isn't really at a level that's easy to hear, you sort of lose the airiness. So I think these two things sort of worked against it sounding spectacularly planar. It certainly sounds smooth, and it kind of goes again, probably closer to a dynamic driver in that respect. But as far as sounding like a brilliant planar in the way that S12 did. It's not quite. It's a different set. This is not an over-energetic tuning, and it will need some volume for it to sound planar. And I just found myself seeking tracks with less bass so I could hear everything. This whole treble level is very deceptively tilted down, and you do need to turn up the volume. Anytime this kind of got in the way of hearing this, it sort of annoyed me, and that's why I said the bass is sort of my least favorite part, because it became sort of intrusive in hearing things in the mid and the treble. I would have much rather had this tilted even down more so I could hear more of this. Again, I could hear exactly where planars were meant to shine. And so that's not exactly what S15 does. S15 is just kind of a general appealing, overall smoother thing, and I think if smooth and refined is your top priority, I think that works well for you. For me, I think there are moments where, like Sam Smith's Lay Me Down Live at Abbey Road, that track, that live version, I think I can hear where it sounds like mid-fi, his voice, her voice, both natural, just richer and fuller. Again, I think this is where I would have really liked to have said that S15 and this third generation planar driver are delivering better detail, better micro details, better dynamics, all the things that planars are very good at. I wish that I was saying those right here rather than their voices sound natural and richer and fuller. I think you can find that in other places. That's not exactly where planars are special at. So, yes, I think they are good, but this isn't exactly where I wanted to be with S15. Other people, I think, will be fine with it, but as a planar fanboy, I wasn't so keen on that. And I think Adele's Hello, kind of in the same ballpark. She has a real rich, full voice. Does it hit the high highs that you might have expecting from a balanced armature hybrid or even S12? Not quite. And if you like those BA edges and that BA sharpness on mid-fi hybrids, that's not where S15 specializes either. It's this warmer, smoother sound. It's not even a planar sound. It's just a warmer, smoother sound. And again, it's not quite exactly where I wanted to be talking about on the next generation planar, but you kind of hear it here. London Grammar's Hey Now, it's sort of where you notice that treble is really pulled back and it doesn't sound as open, it doesn't sound as ethereal, it doesn't sound as airy. It's really good playback. It's really smooth and really safe, and people are going to really like it, but it's not really an amazing experience. It's not really an amazing planar experience. And Mazzy Stars Fade Into You, same exact thing. It should sound very ethereal, should be a lot of airiness to it, and it kind of just sounds solid, but not necessarily the experience that I would say you got to pay $330 to hear this. It's kind of things that you can find on other sets. So stage, again, take the time to tip and source roll this one, find the immersive stage. I heard multiple versions of stage on this set depending on what source it is, and it goes from a very flat, almost a brighter flat, to a very immersive where it wraps around to the back of your head. And I think, again, this treble level is very tricky, finding a source that matches with your tips and gives you the immersive stage that $330 should sound like. So yeah, that was sort of my hesitation with reviewing this set, is I heard multiple versions which didn't sound like $330, and then my SMSL kind of got there. But yeah, very, very tricky to get all the stars aligned so this sounds like it should sound at $330. So yes, even I hesitated on this one for various reasons. Price, stage, kind of this bit of not having something to point to that can say that no other planar can do this and no other planar can do it at a price point, or there's just nothing here that I could have pointed to that says you couldn't find somewhere else other than smoother and more refined. So that's what I got on S15. So thank you again for tuning in, and I will see you next time.